As all other continents and countries, the citizens of Africa rely a lot on the use of folklore as well as cultural and societal rules established through generations. These stories are often connected to real life issues they are currently experiencing, or they experienced before the tales started being told. The films I Am Not a Witch 2017, Night of Kings 2020, and Atlantics 2019 all try to explore how supernatural beliefs or superstitions affect the respective communities their stories take place on. But, instead of doing in heavily direct narrative like other filmmakers before them as Usman and Bennett, these films explore these issues through genres like comedy and horror, for a more subtle but clear exploration of these social issues. I Am Not a Witch shows the audience how easy it is to exploit people by using cultural prejudices or beliefs to their advantage. Director Rungano Nioni explores these issues through the use of comedy and drama, as she dives into the story of Shula. Shula is a girl who ends up wandering a Samanian village and is accused by the locals for being a witch, for what seems to be no particular reason. From here, the film uses its satire to highlight how ridiculous it is how these set of witches are being treated throughout the film like these civil servants. To an audience member, it may feel out of place to laugh at the situations presented in the film, but as Niani mentions, they see this disconnect between the humor and the anger, but for me, it's very connected. The use of humor here has made me feel a lot more connected to Shula and make her extremely relatable even when in paper we don't have any shared qualities. And therefore, when Shula kills herself, it was much more effective to me than in comparison to similar films like Black Girl. Therefore, the humor is used here to subvert the expectations of the audience, as we hope for a happier or a different kind of happy ending than the one we actually get. Night of Kings mixes what is essentially the genre of fantasy and somewhat of a thriller, as the director highlights how important folklore is to a community and especially isolated communities. Director Philippe Lacote wanted to explore the issues he experienced in the Ivory Coast, and more specifically the story of the gang leader Sama King, who was killed by an angry mob in 2015. The director decided to explore the story of civil unrest by setting in the Lamaka prison in the Ivory Coast. But as Goodfellow mentions, the director need not want to be this a classic biopic. He then crafted a story around Roman, a new inmate at the prison who is later forced to become part of a ritual where he needs to become a storyteller to entertain the masses of the prison. The film then starts visually adapting the story of the Roman creeds, which is in part based on the story of the gang leader he knew, now Asama King. Here Lacote wanted to highlight just how important the stories were to the inmates, as in many ways it was their only connection to the outside world, but at the same time were a mirror to their situation inside of the prison. Atlantics, released in 2019 and directed by Mavi Diop, aimed to use the horror genre to show the effects of migrants needing to leave their home countries in Africa for better life prospects. The film follows Ada and her friends, as many of their lovers are forced to leave the country through the Atlantic Sea in hopes of finding jobs, as their job in Senegal scammed them and didn't pay them for months. Madi Diop had already explored the themes found in this film through a short documentary called Atlantics, released in 2009, as the story revolves around young men deciding to migrate to other countries. Atlantics focuses more on the reason why would men leave, while Atlantics feels more of an exploration of how it affects their loved ones back home, as their presence remains even though they aren't there anymore. Diop uses this to her advantage as she makes the inevitable outcome for the workers to be that they become ghosts, forever haunting and being a part of the people who they left behind. This interpretation worked extremely well to the film's favor, as it allowed for an always present visual of memories of the workers. All of these films show how well you can incorporate cultural issues into narrative by tying it closely to your genre. Minded Diop uses horror to illustrate the pain left with the people who go on and the ones who are left behind. Rungano Nioni uses the comedy to contrast heavily with the anger the alleged witches felt when being taken advantage of. And Philippe Lacote uses fantasy to show how stories can unite people for a goal, whether good or bad. I believe these attempts to match genre with societal programs are a good technique to address these issues in film, as it not only leads to what could be a more accessible film for audiences, but something that might stick in their memories a lot longer.